Hey everybody, I'm Todd with Head First Performance and Endurance Diet Expert. Today, Tom Waggener from Small Batch Cyclery is going to show us how to change a tire on the side of the road.
Hi, my name is Tom Waggener with Small Batch Cyclery in Simpsonville, Kentucky. Today we're going to be showing you how to do a common flat tire repair on the road, which is probably where it's going to happen. Flat tires are the most common mechanical that face most cyclists today, and if you're a long distance cyclist or even a casual cyclist, it's good to know how to repair it when that time comes. So today we're going to be walking you through step by step and making sure that it's a simple and easy process to follow so that when you do have that flat, you can do it yourself no problem. So when you get to the side of the road, you want to find a nice grassy area that you can do your work in so that you're A, out of the way of the traffic, and B, you can put your bike down when you need to without worrying about scuffing up the handlebars, saddles, or pedals, or what have you. Alright, so I've got a rear flat. We decided we would do a rear flat because it's definitely the harder of the two flats. And the first thing we're going to want to do is find our rear brake quick release. Most modern bikes are going to have a little lever like this, and what that does is open the brakes so that the tire can clear on its way out of the bike. It's not going to be too much of an issue when the tire's flat, it's definitely going to clear, but after you've inflated it, when you go to put it back in, you want this open so that you don't push your pads out of alignment. So we've opened our quick release, now we're ready to get our wheel off. First thing we want to do, just to make things a little easier on ourselves, is shift into the smallest cog in the back. That way we know which gear we're going to put it in when we put the wheel back in, and it also makes it a little easier to remove and install the wheel because there's more slack in the chain. So go ahead, shift down into your smallest cog, or hardest, and now we're going to flip the bike over on its seat and handlebars so that we can access that wheel more easily. With the rear quick release, you really don't have to worry so much about de-threading the nut so much, you just have to open the lever and then your wheel should be loose enough to come out. What I'm going to do is take the rear derailleur, I'm going to flex it open like that so that I'm not fighting the chain as much, and then I'm just going to lift that wheel out. Sometimes you have to give it a good tug, but it'll come right out. Clear it from the chain. Most modern road bikes are going to have what's called a Presta valve inner tube. So we take off our little cap, go ahead and take off this little nut. It doesn't really do anything anyway. I put those to the side, let any air out of the tube that might be left in there. The way that we let air in and out is by making sure this little nut is open. So here it's closed, I can't let air out, just going to spin that out and it opens a valve to let air out. Next we're going to take one bead of the tire off the rim. I'm a firm believer that all of this can be done with one lever. It may take some time to get used to it, but if you're working with a completely flat tire, it shouldn't be too hard. Take your one tire lever, slip it in under the bead. Try not to catch that tube in case you can reuse it. You don't want to pinch it. Now I'm going to hold the rim with my free hand. I take the lever and just kind of slide it around slowly. Go ahead and slide about a third of the tire off. At this point, go ahead and take this off. Get used to working with your hands, because if you can do more of it with your hands and less with the lever, you have a lower risk of pinching that tube, which is something you especially don't want to do after you get the new tube. Now I'm going to free one bead of the tire off the rim, and I'm going to remove my flat inner tube. Okay, at this point, one thing you definitely don't want to forget is to check your tire for any foreign object like a piece of glass or wire, anything that might still be in the tire that if we don't get it out, it's just going to reflat the new tube. So I'm just going to run my fingers along the inside of that tire. I like to start and end at the valve stem hole so that I know I've done the whole tire. That's one lap around, we're good. Set that down. Now, if you're really frugal and you want to, you can patch that old tube, but most cyclists today choose to just put in a new tube and maybe later patch that tube or just stitch it. So, In my saddlebag I have a new tube, and I have a CO2 inflation device and some CO2s. Just going to get that started and ready. You may have a portable pump. If you have a portable pump, that's going to take you longer, but it is going to save you the cost of the CO2 cartridges. Okay, so I've got my new tube. Gonna let my inflation device to the side for now. Take off the black cap. We've got to open our Presta valve so that it can take air. You want to start with just a little bit of air in that tube. Just make it round so you can use your CO2, or if you feel like you've got good VO2. Get a little practice there. You just want to make sure it's round, just so there's enough shape that it can go back inside the tire. If you don't want to do that, if you have a CO2 inflation device that lets you control the flow of the CO2, you can put just a little bit in. This works by de-threading. I let the air out, so with a quick turn, all right, more than enough. I may even have to let some of the air out. Okay, so with my just round tube, I'm ready to reinstall. I'm going to start at the valve stem, slip it in. Now I just want to seat this tube inside the tire. So I'm kind of pushing it in with each hand and sliding around. I know it looks easy, and it may be frustrating when you first try to do it, but you'll be able to do it after you've tried this a few times. So what I want to look for now is, ideally this bead is going to be flat against the rim, and that means that the tube is completely inside the tire. I want to look for areas like this, where a little bit of tube is still peeking out over my rim. I want to push that over, because the last thing I want to do is pinch my new tube. So now, if you're having trouble getting this kind of flat bead against the rim of the tire, it may be because you put too much air in that tube. Go ahead and just let a little bit out, just so the tube isn't fighting against the tire so much. Now I'm ready to install the second bead. So I'm going to start at the valve stem, and I'm just going to roll over a little bit. I'm going to get about 8 inches on, and then what I want to do is take this valve stem and just push it up. This is the most common place to get a pinched tube, because the valve stem is pulling the tube down. You want to make sure you don't have any of the tube caught underneath the bead, so you just push that up in there, and then continue to work the second bead of the tire onto the rim. This is a really easy tire. Some tires are going to be harder than this, especially some of the nicer Continentals. Alright, so I've got my last 8 or so inches of bead. This is where it's going to be hard. You might need to use that lever. I'm going to try to get as much on as I can. This is a tire that I know I can roll all the way on, but a lot of times you're going to have to use that tire lever, and you have to be careful so that you don't pinch the tube. So what I want to do is, I'm going to pull the bead away just so I can slip my tire lever up in there. I want to push until I can just kind of feel the hook of that lever get over the rim. I don't want to push beyond that, because again, I really don't want to pinch my fresh tube. So I'm going to take that and easily pop it on over, slide, pop it on over. The minute you feel like you can slide that tire onto the rim, do so without the lever. At this point, I want to make sure that I've got my tube inside the tire completely. So I'm going to push the bead away from the rim wall and just look to see if I can see any of that tube peeking out. If I can see tube, I want to make sure it's in the tire, because even a little 1/4 inch or so of exposed tube between the tire bead and the rim is going to push its way out until it completely blows out under pressure. It's going to sound like a gunshot. You're going to get a little bit of tinnitus. It's not an experience you want to have, especially when you're trying to get home. This tube is in the tire, and we're ready to inflate. And I've got my cartridge. Even though I used a little bit to pre-inflate that tube, I should have plenty left to get enough PSI to get me home. Many people ask how much PSI this gets into a tire. It's probably not 120, and it's probably more like 80 or 90 PSI. It's enough to get you home, get you to your forward pump, and check the tire to make sure it's got the pressure you want in it. I'm going to open my valve stem back up. And I'm going to start. I just want to make sure that, just want to put enough in to let the tire take form against the bead. And then I'm going to look and see if I have any irregularities in height that might lead to a tube pushing its way out. We seated that tube well. I just want to double check. Tube seems to be seated pretty well. We're ready to put in as much of this as we can and get back on the road. You'll see another tip. Do as I say, not as I do. You really should use something on these CO2 cartridges because they can get ice cold. You can use the old tube or a cloth, anything to protect your hand. I'm okay this time, but a lot of times it can get so cold you can actually get a little bit of a burn on your hands from these ice cold CO2 cartridges. Alright, don't know how much pressure I have, but it feels like enough. My tire is seated well. I can see that the bead has no irregularities or high spots in it. I'm ready to reinstall this rear wheel. So, because I put it in the small cog to start, I know that's where it's going to go when I put it back in. I'm going to cock my derailleur back. You might have to move the chain around. I like to use the skewer so I don't get my hands dirty. Get the chain on that small cog, and now your rear wheel should drop in with relative ease. This one's not. Okay, we're back in. Sometimes you have to make sure that the chain is aligned over the derailleur pulleys. You also have to make sure that your brake pads are not fighting the tire. We're back in. I make sure I'm seated. Check my quick release. So a little note on quick releases. The curved side should be facing out generally when it's closed, and so with the lever facing straight out, you should start to feel tension. It's going to be hard to close it all the way, but that's where you want to start to feel some tension in that lever to know that you're getting enough force to keep it in the wheel. Okay. Wheel is seated. I'm going to close my little lever on the rear brake so that my braking is good. I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel and shift a few times because I really don't want to start out in that 11-tooth cog. And check that the wheel doesn't have any wiggle room. My quick release is good. Everything's spinning true. I'm ready to get back on the road. Before you leave, make sure you clean up any bits of garbage, old CO2s, old tubes. Take those with you. Don't leave those out in Mother Nature. And have a great ride.